Welcome to Game of Nodes, a weekly podcast on the cosmos from independent validator teams.
Hey!
I can't believe that worked. Did you press the button and it finally worked?
I've been pressing it for the last 13 minutes non-stop.
Amazing. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Game of Nodes. Sorry about the slight delay. As Null just said, possibly was heard on the stream, we're validators. We don't have a backup plan. So when our streaming provider of choice decided to go down for 15 minutes right at the start of the stream, we were completely effed. So anyway, we're happy to be here. Thank you for joining us. And what are we going to be talking about tonight? Null.
So we're talking about Prop 16. We avoided the shit out of it last time we had a stream, and now we're talking about it. But it's just like a bit of a general chat about a few of the different proposals that have gone up. And I don't think we're going to be, picking sides or anything like that. We're just having a nice general chat about what's available and then moving on. And we're going to talk about some monitoring this week as well as a little bit of Horcrux and whatever anyone else decides to talk about. And, Horcrux is a signing method that Jack has pioneered, actually, in his team. So anyway, moving on. So does anyone want to make an introduction to the Prop 16 for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about?
Oh, man.
There he is.
That's a loaded question. Hey, Joe, so they said that you're going to give an introduction on Prop 16 right off the bat. Just tell me your feelings. Welcome. Let's go. Share it.
It's so simple, like a baby could understand.
I had to explain this to my wife the other night. It was challenging.
I used your flowchart, Joe.
Yes. I need to try that. Vanessa would love it.
So we like to reward early adopters and financial backers of crypto systems.
Reward early adopters and financial backers of.
Who is that?
Why am I?
Oh, there we go.
That was
somebody's watching.
The person who is slowly nodding positive. I'm guessing. Okay, please continue.
Sorry, Joe. Yeah.
So we do these things called airdrops, and they usually work out great because we reward people that participate, and everything's merry. And then we do them again and again and again, and life is great. And the trick is to construct the airdrops in a way that they're fair, and that they don't over reward someone, or that they're not announced too early, so someone can try to get all the tokens for free. And what we found in the Juno stake drop is that someone got more tokens than we expected. And by we, I mean the core team. I'm a bystander. So the core team discovered that they had awarded more tokens than they wanted to. And so there was an initial attempt to try to pull those back. It was rejected. There was a second attempt to pull those back. It passed. And now we're trying to figure out what that means, how we can do it. And in the meantime, there have been a few alternative proposals or remediations recommended. And so, we've basically been hashing that out. So it really comes down to, does governance override your keys, your crypto? And I think in extenuating circumstances, we've seen it do that. We've seen it do that in Cosmos. We've seen it do it in Osmosis. And Juno is the next test of those two principles.
I think that's a really nice way of laying it out, Joe.
I feel like it's worth taking.
I haven't thought about it much.
I feel like it's worth taking a moment to talk a little bit longer about airdrops, because really that's where the important bit here comes from. And airdrops are such a specific thing to crypto that, granted, everyone that's viewing probably knows crypto, but for those that don't, it's really worth emphasizing the importance of an airdrop to stimulate the initial community. Juno's kind of claim to fame was that it's, basically by the people for the people. It's a community network. But other chains, they use airdrops to achieve different things. For example, Dig, they airdropped to a social network, I want to say, in order to bring in like a specific community into theirs. And so because airdrops have this certain basis around them, thought structure around them, it's very common for people to try and game it, which is kind of the reason why people thought initially that the whale was trying to game it deliberately. A lot of people, they will create different wallets. They will, stick a single token on 100 different wallets and stake all of them to try and optimize their airdrop, because in theory, it should be very profitable, such as in this example. But in effect, the intention of it is to stimulate the community, as you said.
Yeah, so I think, in terms of Juno and the airdrop in Juno and the whale, I think the basis of, the outrage is that they've unfairly gained a large amount of token on the network, basically, and that it's sort of, a lot of people feel it's not in the spirit, I guess, of the airdrop and what it was meant for. So people seem, concerned that someone with that amount of token, no matter how they got it, can in some way damage the network by, selling, I guess, is the biggest fear, a lot of token at once. But it's raised a lot of, it's not...
Well, I think more than just selling, it's governance too. Because... like what Joe is saying, where governance really does end up having absolute control over this. We've seen this happen in a couple of other chains where we can sort of make arbitrary state modifications. And if that governance power would be used maliciously by an actor with a huge percentage of stake, that creates danger. And, the selling thing is something that I think a lot of folks are... No, you're absolutely right. Like, a lot of folks are worried about that. But for me personally, I think the governance thing is a little bit more worrying.
So yeah, I think there's a bit of a divide, isn't there? Where I think devs and validators maybe think governance is probably the bigger of the two issues, and that as long as they don't dump all their tokens in one go, it's not that it's a non-issue, but it's the tokens are there. It's not the end of the world. Is a kind of pretty common. There are variations. I think there's a spectrum of opinions, obviously, but the governance thing is the one that I think, certainly every dev and validator I've really talked to is worried about the governance implications. Whereas I definitely feel like, from having spoken to people in the community over the last week, be it on Twitter, be it on Telegram, and frankly, people coming out and saying, don't agree with your view on this. Here's what I think is the biggest thing, is that it generally seems that in the community at large, the thing that is concerning is the pure number of tokens, and whether that means, whether that's simply that they are perceived as unfair, or whether that's for dumping reasons or eliminating liquidity reasons. I don't know. I think there's a variety of opinions as to why that's a bad thing, but I think that's also muddying the water of like how we've been trying to discuss this thing, because I think a lot of the time we're going like, oh, but we can solve the governance issue in all of these different ways. But it comes back to the thing that Joe said, right? Which is it in our resolution of this, which are we giving primacy to, right?
And so what we've also heard, right, is arguments about real world circumstances where, well, if a bank gives you money in error, the bank can claw it back. And it's like, well, we're not really a bank. This isn't really a currency. If someone, gives you property, at least in America, the government can't take your private property without, getting through some additional, warrants or, legislation or paying you for the property. In goods, if someone delivers a package to your door and you didn't order it, it's yours. The company can't call up and say, hey, by the way, you need to pay for this, or hey, by the way, I want that back. it's yours. There's consumer protection laws that protect you in that instance.
So this is also quite interesting, though, for the reason of, like, you know, I think a lot of people who are validators in particular are obviously concerned about the law in their jurisdiction. But an interesting corollary of this entire discussion. So obviously I work on a lot of the several different projects that are building on Juno, and the dev teams are multinational, right? We're in multiple jurisdictions. The chain itself is in no fixed jurisdiction. And so it's a kind of like, how do you even set up a project to work on a chain when it's fundamentally multilateral, right? And then how do you work out what you're liable for? Because, you know, there are people who will say to you, if you say you're a validator and you're concerned about regulators, so I don't think it takes a regulatory lawyer in a lot of situations to look at the current regulation, depending on your jurisdiction, and make a pretty clear risk profile of what's going on here. But then people can quite reasonably say, well, but which regulator do you mean? Are we talking about Japan here? Are we talking about the UK? Are we talking about the US, Europe? Where? And there is a real sense in which nobody really knows, you know, where the jurisdiction of these things begins and ends. We just know where we are. You know,
one really weird note about this on the jurisdiction thing, especially, I think it would be really fascinating if Juno is the first chain that decides to do sort of an unorthodox state migration like this in a way that was not forced by any government agency. Because there's been a lot of ink spilled and sort of think pieces written about how these networks are, like, potentially vulnerable to outside pressure from state agencies, and, like, if the state agencies decided to try to push for something like blocked addresses, they could coerce the networks into running them. But this is something that our community has chosen voluntarily, which, you know, as a crazy crypto libertarian / anarchist, makes me feel things that I don't quite know what to say about. It's leads to a lot of very interesting questions.
I
think a lot of us have been thinking that this is a really, really academically interesting situation, and that we're all really, really excited about the blog posts and think pieces we're going to write after this is all over. But it would be really, like, totally awesome if we still had Juno to work on when this was all over as well, you know?
I do think it's very important to stress the number of paths that we have considered to implement, to devise, to work around, to undo the undo.
In between the dog gifts and just with my chat with you, Joe, I think there's been about 1,500 different potential solutions.
Yes, and so with each one of them, there's repercussions. There's potential fail cases where you know, we suddenly halt the chain, and so how can we prevent that? And so, you know, I understand that we all want this to come to a close, but we want to do it with intention and care, and to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for, you know, a bright future, as opposed to setting the stage for a dark, bleary, authoritarian thing.
Yeah.
So
I think if we can agree on anything, it's that this hasn't been great for Juno as a whole, and it's been incredibly stressful for a lot of people, no matter which side of the fence you're on. You know, whether you're pro yes or pro no with veto, or whether you're just or the whale, or, you know, whether you're piggy in the middle. It's been incredibly stressful, and I think a lot of people are starting to get fatigued from it as well. And I think the community as a whole, on all sides of the fence, really just want it to be a resolution and to be able to move on with development, which, you know, you don't hear much of the development at the moment because of all this as well. So there's a lot of good projects and important things going on.
I mean, there is development happening, though. Sorry, usurper.
No, that's okay, Jack. I was going to say, and it's such a weird fence. You said, like, be on both sides of the fence, but it's not even pro CCN and you know, against this. It's some pitchforking and, this is a wrong that we need to right, which I understand. That's a valid viewpoint. And then there's this, what we've been talking about, which is, like Jack made a good point, like, are we setting a precedent for how other bodies can come in and say, this is not immutable. This is something that can be changed. Like, all we had was a very close vote that had really poor documentation and details behind, and then had confusion in terms of, hey, change your vote at the last minute, and a lot of other things like going on through that process, that it's a really weird fence. Thanks, dude. And I think that it's such I don't know, it's a really difficult position. So I think this pitchforking out here, like around those validators, the people who are saying, hey, we want to stop and think about this, doesn't necessarily mean that it's one side of this weird proverbial fence, but it's a little bit more around how do we want to set a precedent here about how this goes forward. And so I think there is a lot of stress around it, and there is a lot of conversation around it. I know that this community is really, really vibrant around trying to solve, like to fix this, to right this wrong type of idea. But I don't know if there's really a hurry. I know everybody says, looking at the rewards out of that account, that's been going on for how long, right? 8 months or whatever it is. Like, if we take another month, who cares? Like, it's not a big deal. Like, it's not something that if this proposal didn't come forward, we would not be talking about this right now, right? If this proposal wasn't, this might have been something we might have come up like a year from now, like, holy shit, look at this account, right? But just because of this fever and this kind of structure that we created now, I think it's feeding on itself. And I think what worries me most about this, and I'll stop talking, is that I don't want to set a precedent around just creating a fever that gets generated in Twitter and other types of things, and we're running after this type of thing without really understanding the reason or the why or anything else, and trying to get to the details of what's going on there.
I think something else worth noting as well is that up until now, the CCN have been diluting themselves every day by selling. So they've actually been reducing their voting power every day by diluting themselves by selling, and that's now stopped.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. Like if we make them never sell and stake every day, then they're just going to increase their voting power.
I think as well, like just picking up on what Yusep was saying there as well, I think, Noel, you said this a couple of weeks ago when this first kicked off, which is like, however we come to a solution here, like everybody will hate it in the short term, and in 2 months we won't be talking about it. Like,
I mean, this is the inherent nature of compromise. If there's one thing that good governance does, it forces people to compromise. So I think that if we all hate it, that's probably a good indication that it's working well.
I agree. Yeah.
But on the one thing I want to kind of circle back on that we've kind of brushed over, and I think that as somebody who voted no on the proposal and has been very public in their views, this is something that I feel like doesn't get enough air. Like CCN, like not great.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I know.
Just like, I think we can all agree that like CCN is not great. I found out about them.
I have to say, allegedly CCN are not great.
It's not great.
Allegedly been involved in some not great behavior.
Yeah.
Very allegedly.
I forget that in England you guys have actual censorship, which is kind of hilarious. The home of the free press, where it started, and you guys have censorship. I found out about this entity back in 2020. Someone's like, they're running this huge MLM in Japan, and like there were the Tokume Anso Twitter account at that time had just photos and videos of people like speaking about Cosmos. And like, I don't know if people know what was happening back then, but that was like DeFi summer had tailed off, prices were way down, like we hadn't hit the crypto bull yet. Like Atom was struggle zone. We hadn't shipped IBC yet. It was a real tough time. And like nobody was buying Atom. And CCN went from nowhere to the fourth largest validator by doing whatever they did in Japan. So like, the really morally murky things are like, to get this cool IBC thing that we really like, a huge part of that might have been like this weird MLM scheme in Japan that like none of us like, did a bunch of shady things
That drove the price up, right?
that drove the price up. That bought when nobody else was buying, so essentially supported the price. Yep. Yeah, that one's super weird to me, and I don't know quite how to feel about it. And then like suddenly they get all these IBC airdrops because they have this weird wallet management strategy where they're like, the whole story is stranger than fiction in a lot of ways. And like, yeah, it's bizarre to me.
I mean, also the whole story of this, how this is unfolded with the interactions and stuff. At first I thought it was the language barrier, and then for a while I was like, are they negotiating in bad faith? Do they just not understand the seriousness of the situation?
No.
And I think it's actually a combination of a lot of the above. And also, I don't know if you've seen these guys, but they're also like, I'm not that old, but they're young guys as well. They're young guys who have made a lot of money. And I think there's a really strong element that they don't really know how they've ended up here other than they have. And some of that's obviously been intentional. Obviously, you don't just make that kind of money without making conscious decisions along the way. But there is, like you just said, Jack, there's a stranger than fiction element to this entire thing. Yeah. Which I think, the kind of weirdness element of it cannot be underestimated in terms of how we've ended up. If you start off with a fundamentally weird situation, you can't be too surprised that it gets weirder and weirder and weirder the more you scratch, right? Yeah. And we're at the point now where we've scratched off every single layer of the many.
I don't know about that. I think that there's this whole onion sitting down there about the real history of CCN that once people find out about it, everyone's going to be like, fucking really? I don't know. I just know what the onion smells like at this point, and I'm like, that onion did not smell good.
Yeah, and I would say that I think it's not. I think it's well within my rights within the legal and libel system of the UK to say there is something a bit fishy going on here. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's why I voted no. It smells wrong, but I couldn't find where the smell came from. So is it?
Right, exactly. I mean, that's exactly it. I think, the position that we came out very publicly with a no vote relatively early on in 16's discussion, moved to no with veto, have taken some flack for that. And I think it kind of boils down to this thing of there's obviously something weird going on here, and we obviously don't like the whale, and definitely think there's something a bit up with their business practices. But can we extend that to breaking what we see as sanctity of wallet balances because we don't like somebody?
That's not really the trial, right? I mean, the trial is was this delivered erroneously, and should it be, is there a problem with that? And I think Joe started this out with saying that this was delivered by mistake. I don't know if you used that term, or maybe I just heard that term. But it wasn't delivered. It wasn't though, right? Because at the time they were separate wallets. Only later did we realize, or that I guess individuals realized after they combined it. If they wouldn't have combined it, we wouldn't have had this conversation, right? It would have just been 50 wallets that all had a ton of Atom in it, right? Or maybe 73 or 76 wallets, whatever it is. No, I thought anyway.
I keep finding.
That's a separate episode. It's episode 4.
Can we do a whole episode?
It's a teaser for episode 3. Yeah.
It's just Gabby with a flipboard and a pointer. It's as you can see from position 5, and then flips over the flipboard. And be like, this is another wallet I discovered.
Right. So, but after that was discovered, then I think really then I started to understand. Okay, this is maybe one person, and then after that was when the proposal came forward, and then really the investigation started to understand. And then we had reveal of who that group was. Then we started understanding if it was an exchange or not. Right, all that happened after the proposal was delivered. So, I think it's kind of like we went to trial before we had a case to really understand what the details of that case was, and we went into trial and we realized, oh crap, we have the wrong thing on trial here. But I do think, going back to the point before, which is how the business run part of this decision, and I think it's like a jury situation, I guess, maybe, but it's really difficult to put that on trial as part of the fun piece of it, because there's probably
It's
more
also
to
a
that
weird
onion as well,
precedent,
right?
Isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
you know, like if we're going to put on trial an entity because put it whichever way you want, like it's their business practices or we don't like them or whatever, then
Right.
what's to stop a regulator coming along later and saying, well, look, you guys, you did this thing before because you were like, they're super shady and you wrote
Sure.
a lot of stuff publicly and
Yeah.
you put your reasoning on chain and then voted on it. So we say these guys are terrorists or these guys are whatever. And like, again, I'm not making a moral judgment on this either way. Like, I'm not super jazzed about criminals or terrorists or whatever. Anyway, but it's about whether or not we actually have a remit to act or whether we're setting a precedent here, or specifically a precedent that can be repeated. And then, you know,
Right.
back to your point, Usurper, you were saying like a lot of the reasoning here was rushed, but I think that's why it was very important to look at Jabby's first proposal, which was, you know, the reasoning of the proposal was of Prop 16, the wording was everything over 50K, you know, gamed wallet. And by that, you have to then look at Jabby's first proposal, which is every single wallet over 50K, which merged and which we can identify, that isn't the Prop 14 multi-sig quick edition or the IBC relayer account. You know, if you're going to claim it's a clawback or a generic clawback, I think you have to, that's the only argument you can fall back on, say we have to burn all those. But, you know, that burning 13 wallets or whatever is not a good look. So it's kind of, again, back to the, like, you know, what is, and I know we didn't know this before Prop 16 went live, and that's why we are where we are, right?
That's a super important.
It's very fundamental to what we're talking about, isn't it?
In that Prop 16 went live before I think any of us on this call knew it was a thing.
Yeah.
We knew that Prop 4 was a thing, but we didn't know Prop 16 was going to happen until, you know, oh, look, there's a proposal up for vote. Hey, wait a second, this looks familiar.
What is this? Yeah.
I think I was on Splitting Atoms 2 weeks ago when this happened. And I think you can see me at the beginning of the show go, oh, this proposal just went up on Juno. This is going to be a disaster.
And you weren't wrong.
Yeah.
Yes, the Cosmos Club Network.
So does anyone...
AKA Debo, AKA Game. Well, didn't they have some rug from 2017? Or a couple of rugs?
So Mold, I think, was their original...
Mold. AKA Mold.
So I'm not sure if that was. I mean, I don't really know the details of it, but I'm not sure it was a rug. I think basically it was their game project called Mold that they were going to do on another network, and then so they ICO'd, I believe, and then the arse fell out of everything. So I think the plan was to distribute some of the game to the Mold holders or something like that, but can't be really sure. I haven't seen the tokenomics of the thing, but. Yeah, don't know if it's legit a rug though, I guess is what I'm saying.
So when I was investigating like the claims for Prop 16, one of the things that some folks were asking me was, would you care if they were MLM Ponzi scammers? And I was like, no. As written, there's the criteria for the stake drop. They have met the stake drop criteria. They applied this before they could have known the stake drop criteria. There's nothing wrong here. And then they write a Medium article that says, so we sort of hold our customers' funds in custody, and we provide liquidity on their behalf, and we also buy and sell Atom on their behalf. And I'm like, well, that's like the definition of an exchange.
They have a lot of holes in their feet, for sure.
Yeah. Well, they also take a huge commission, but the period in which they bought Atom and then gave it back to people basically ensures that whatever they did otherwise, like they made their clients like a 4X, so who can get mad at them? Which is kind of another crazy situation about this whole CCN thing that Wait,
yeah, exactly.
what?
Even if it was done in like with the intention to like potentially like, so even if somebody could successfully allege that they were doing it with the intent of defrauding customers, which obviously would be a serious allegation,
Yes.
and is not proven, they nevertheless, because of market conditions, returned a forex return for their customers, thus making them kind of great guys if you're their customers, right? Which is insane, right? Because when else would such a thing like accidentally be that
crypto.
profitable,
It's
right?
only crypto.
Well, and they advertised fairly modest returns, something like 8% or 7% or something like that, and to instead get 400% in 2 years, that
yeah,
it's nice.
Whether or not they actually return that much to their clients, I don't know, because I think they had contracts with a fixed APR in place. So I think what actually happened was it was like a bank savings account where you say you can get 2.5%. Let's say, I mean, you definitely would not get 2.5% right now with current market conditions, but like, if you give the bank your money, they give you 2.5% back on the savings rate, but then they go gamble with that, doing options or CDOs or something, which is what banks actually do with your money, and they return 10 times investment or they lose it all. They take that and you still get 2%, whether they lose it all or whether they return 100 times, And I think like it's a kind of a similar situation here, wild and crazy though it is, and some of the jump throughs as well to kind of make all that work are super sus. Like the fact they were issuing essentially a token that was not a token to represent the atom, like that's like a bearer token security. I mean,
oh yeah, that's all kinds of securities law issues.
So I mean, this is not an alleged. I can just say this. If they did that in the United Kingdom, that would require full regular. I mean, first of all, the running an exchange that requires regulation with the FCA. Issuing a token that's pegged to the potential security that acts as a security. Pretty sure that's a regulated activity. There's a lot of things there that are like, okay,
yeah.
That's how, because again, none of us are Japanese legal experts. Obviously, this apparently can get around whatever legal restrictions are in place, but gosh, it does not look good.
Yeah, so if you just look at Prop 16 as written, which everyone likes to go back to because they're like, why aren't you doing what Prop 16 written? Well, it was wrong. It was categorically wrong. It made claims that are false. And we can prove it. Like, look, I have the data that says it's wrong. So why aren't you implementing it? Well, that's neither here nor there because the community voted, and so the expectation is that, of course, we'll carry that out. And so in my authoring of a follow-up proposal was to try to set the record straight and make sure that we're not going to face liability on making false claims and executing judgment or remediation based off of false claims. And so, I think the virtual currency exchange definition based off of Japanese law is still even like shaky ground. So at any rate,
it's interesting though.
Definitely exercised my understanding of I am not a lawyer.
Yeah, no kidding. It's interesting though, because this idea, I don't know if they're exchange or not, whatever that definition is, but get away from that. Like I've been on 10 WebExes lately in the last 6 months around funds built in the US that take in customer money, that stake across multiple crypto chain, like different ecosystems that return back with a K1, right? Like just a standard investment that has a structured endpoint on that. That might be one wallet or many wallets. Who knows? It's a fund account, right? People are putting in $100,000, $200,000 into a fund account. They might make 60 million or something like that, and then be able to stake that across multiple chains, and they return some sort of understanding of fixed percentages. Do they get airdrops? Like they would, right? Like depending on how they're getting blacked out, like they might have maybe they have multiple wallets to get around that type structure. The same thing, like regardless of where CCN those funds, where they came from, and the story behind that, I'm not defending that in any sort of way. But this problem is not unique to this individual group. I think this is going to be a bigger and bigger issue. And if a group like that, like, how would they deal with that in the U.S. from a tax perspective to say, hey, we had these customer accounts and now we airdropped 50 million in value across these other types of chains, but they're not traded, so they don't really have yeah, exactly. Like, I think it's a really interesting issue.
Oh, Joe might have some Joe might have some interesting thoughts on this.
Viewpoint?
So
Grayscale is a fantastic over-the-counter fund that you can invest in on Fidelity or other exchange services, stock exchange services, and so you can buy a share of this fund that represents a share of Bitcoin, called GBTC, or Grayscale Bitcoin Trust.
Okay.
And when that happened, I bought into it before the Bitcoin Cash split, and then Bitcoin Cash split. And so suddenly, you have all these investors wondering, hey, wait a second, like, shouldn't I get GBCH or whatever is equivalent?
Sure.
And what ultimately happened was they said, okay, we're going to hold on to it for a second. We're going to see which way the market goes. And the market stayed with Bitcoin. And so then they liquidated the BCH. And then, like, I got an airdrop of USD in my Fidelity account out of the blue. And it's like, oh, great. So
there you go.
That worked out just fine.
So they sold it.
Yeah, they sold it.
They liquidated it.
Did you get your Bitcoin Gold and your Bitcoin Diamond and your Bitcoin Blue and your Bitcoin Secret?
I have so many Bitcoins. Well, not from Grayscale.
I have so many Bitcoins, you guys.
So many
Bitcoins.
But not what you think. I have so many shit Bitcoins.
Shit bits.
Yeah, you just
like, how has Coinbase handled this in the past? Have they given full access to forks and airdrops to people, or like, are they like sitting on keys worth millions of dollars in Osmo and Juno?
Like, some airdrops have to be missing those accounts, right? Like, it has to happen.
Yeah, totally. I mean, for Juno, think about this. If you look at the list of excluded addresses in the Juno airdrop file, it's just the validator addresses of the exchanges, which, like, cool, fine. Exchanges use many other wallets that aren't their validator address.
Sure,
so,
like hot and cold wallets, everything else, right?
No. The airdrop was perfect apart from
just
the
this
whale.
one issue.
Right,
just this one.
No, this is a can you don't want to
airdrop from heaven, mana from heaven. Nothing wrong with this mana.
Well, see, have you heard the micro whale conspiracy theory? This is my favorite conspiracy theory.
Oh, please,
have
sir.
you heard the micro whale conspiracy theory is, so obviously there's been an argument about whether or not Atom has been returned to clients in their own non-custodial wallets by CCN over time, because it's very, very hard to verify that, right? So some have alleged that might not have happened. And the question that comes along with that is, okay, if that didn't happen, then assuming it's trackable, how do you just create 30, 40,000 wallets, right? And manage them as if they're one wallet? And a bunch of people went away and went, maybe it is actually possible to script this. We think that depending on your risk profile, you probably could script it, which leads us to the micro whale hypothesis, which is that statistically speaking, it is certain there is at least one more whale we've missed of some kind. Like, it seems ridiculous that there wouldn't be one more, right? Like the long tail of probability. And so the micro whale hypothesis, like I say, it's a conspiracy theory, but I love it, is that there is a whale with a massive amount of Juno split into lots of tiny wallets that mean that we can't find them. But they're just operating quietly as one kind of large voting block that's scripted.
What I would say to the conspiracy theorists is, like, don't hurt your head. Like,
I mean, Occam's razor applies here, I think, which is that really probably would have seen it. We would have noticed, but...
Well, what about all the accounts with less than one Juno that voted on the governance proposal? speaking of micro accounts and like huge amounts of spam.
If you were the micro whale, what would be the best way of convincing people that the micro whale didn't exist? Would be voting to burn the whale, and then everybody goes, whale situation solved for all time, while the micro whale swims off into the distance on 200 million dust accounts.
Well, these were accounts that had less than one Juno staked.
But
Joe, for the win!
There was so many, like, less than one Juno, but like less than 0.0001 Juno.
Yeah.
Like they were dust. They were just enough to make the
vote.
But that was completely bad for the network too. Like that just adds to the bloody block sizes.
That's spam.
They're spammy and but the transaction bloody index and everything, it's terrible for the network. And there's tens of thousands of those bloody accounts.
No, see, I very much agree with you. It's terrible. State bloat is the worst. I have wanted to finger Joe as Pupmos for a very long time, but I'm convinced that Joe is not Pupmos. I have convinced myself, and I think you need to convince yourselves too, because the real Pupmos is out there, and we're going to find them, and we're going to give them all the head scratches. It's the only way to do it, right?
If I were the real Pupmos, I would not have a Pupmos validator and a Jabby validator. That would be unfair to the network. And so
that would be exactly what the person that was Pupmos would say.
that was
hearing the
reason.
Allegations of Sybil validators against their otherwise quite tight OPSEC.
I mean, you also have a really good theory on that other micro whale, so, whatever.
That would only be...
Please, I want to hear your theories on the micro whale. I love the micro whale conspiracy. It's one of my favorite things to come out of...
Why would I self-incriminate?
Apart from the micro whale, right, to quote Malcolm Tucker in The Thick of It, right, the last week has been like the Shawshank Redemption, except for way more crawling through shit and no fucking redemption, right?
Just an endless pipe.
But the micro whale is like the one glimmer of hope. I'm like,
where does this pipe go?
Period. I love it.
Schulte had a point, I think.
I had a point? What are we talking about?
No, I was going to say...
Prop 15.
I was going to say, the Jabby and Pupmos being a Sybil is only true if Jabby doesn't have split personality. So he might genuinely not know that he's Pupmos.
No, it's like a Fight Club situation. Like he's up at 3 a.m. downstairs, like building up Pupmos, and then wakes up and he's back to Jabby.
Yeah, well, I mean, Pupmos tends to operate in a completely different time period. So,
what happens when Pupmos and Jabby interact on Twitter within minutes of each other? Is Joe like blacking out and then coming back to, and he's like, "Man, something weird happened." I mean, that would be the real Fight Club situation, right?
Totally original idea. Governing dynamic. I'm John Nash.
Tyler Abbey. That's right.
Someone came up with a theory not long ago that it was Wolf Contract.
Pupmos?
Yeah.
I know Wolf. I've known him for a while. Pupmos is far more technical than Wolf is. If you read those wolves, they're pretty smart wolves. That's
Let's not get into that.
So where do we go? So where do we go now on this prop? I think that was one of our points we wanted to get to. Is like, so it's March 23rd. We have the worst negotiation skills from CCN possible, by the way. Like just learn how to negotiate. But we have a win-win-win kind of proposal put up. We have a somewhat of a response kind of from CCN. I think everybody mostly wants some sort of realistic compromise that we can try to hold some ideals around the chain, but at the same time, we want to get past this because I think this doesn't go anywhere but down, right? Like nothing gets built while this happens. This is a topic of conversation for everybody. It's just negative, and I think everybody wants to move on because this is not the goal of what everybody's trying to achieve on this call, plus everybody who's listening to this, right? So realistically, what the hell happens from here?
Can I share my opinion? I think that what we need to do, because we just went through all of the crazy questions that we cannot answer right now about this whole situation and how wild it is. And I think one of the things that's happened is there's this rush to judgment. There's this like thing, people want to do it. I think the best solutions that have come out, the win-win-win proposal that Wolf posted yesterday, some of the other things that are being worked on right now are basically like, let's freeze this account. Let's like put it in a smart contract, have some conditions on that, and like then cooler heads can prevail. We can negotiate with these folks. We can work to figure out a solution here, and like get on with normal business. We've got the Lupercalia upgrade coming up. We got some exciting cross-chain CosmWasm stuff, interchain accounts. Strangelove is like working on interchain account support for the Go relayer. We have this new test framework for IBC chains so that you can spin up any two chains, load them with any smart contracts you want, and test complex IBC flows between the two chains using the relayer in a sort of automated like unit test type fashion. So, you know, I think that if we freeze this account, like kick the can forward a little bit and figure out what to do with it, yeah, smart contract, no unbonding, no staking, no voting. They don't get any more money from this. We like make sure that the threat that this community feels from this governance or this, you know, economic threat that they feel, we neutralize that. And then we try to kind of figure out how to move forward from there. That to me seems like the best option, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, like the more we found out about, okay, I need to phrase this carefully. The more that we have found out about them and their business practices, in my opinion, the more it has become clear that our concerns around their influence on governance are not unreasonable.
They're reasonable. They're really reasonable. Yeah.
Strictly in my opinion, you understand, for the purposes of British law. But it really is the case that like, you know, that we went. I think everybody who went into this even slightly indifferent has now had to read everything that has been posted, read all of the different information that's come out, and then like take a more concrete position. And yeah, it seems to me like the one thing that I think that everybody presumably by now has seen the counter proposal that came out today, which I think Jack described as delusional. Or something like that. I think I described it as unworkable. I think without removing voting power, i.e. influence on governance, and without removing staking, nobody is happy. The community is not happy, validators aren't happy, devs aren't happy. So that has to be the absolute basis of anything we do moving forward. And like you say, the smart contract Unity prop can accommodate that.
Their proposal said, we want to keep our governance vote. We want to keep staking. We want to keep getting rewards. Like, that's literally the status quo.
People don't want them to have.
That's what's happening right now.
That's called having your fucking cake and eating it. And that's exactly what's not going to happen.
Yeah. That's like pretending like nothing happened and that 98% of stake didn't vote for this thing.
Yeah.
And like without, I think that we probably could have gotten a higher percentage of stake to vote for it if we had planned it a little bit better. Like that's not like higher percentage of stake total turnout. I think we would have gotten a higher percentage stake, yes, if we had planned it a little bit better. Like that's wild. That is an absolutely wild statistic. In all of my time in proof of stake blockchains, I have never seen anything like that. Not even close. And the turnout number,
98%.
98%. No, never seen it. Never seen anything above 90. I think Akash got to 89% on one proposal one time, and I was like, "This is wild." You can probably go find my tweet from the time. I'm like, records in proof of stake governance. And like nothing like that.
Just to clarify, though, that wasn't 98% of participants. That was 98% of stake. So that includes validators participating on behalf of stakers.
Yes, I think that. So, I think any way you measure this is sort of a record-breaking governance proposal. Percentage of stake, you're absolutely right, is influenced by the number of validators voting. We had unprecedented validator turnout. That's pretty cool. If you look at the absolute number of votes, even excluding the Juno accounts that had less than one Juno, there's still like 30 or 40,000 people voting for this thing, individuals. I have a friend who's a lawyer. He's been investing in Terra and Cosmos and a bunch of stuff since like early 2020. I hooked him up with Kepler. No. I hooked him up with Kepler. I like showed him how to do all this stuff. He's been like staking Luna and doing DeFi protocols, but he has never voted in a governance proposal until this. And I think that there are many, many cosmonauts out there who this was their first governance experience. And that's cool.
It's fantastic, yeah.
I think that's bullish for Juno. You know, Noel, you said earlier, like this can and does hurt the network in some ways. But I think that what this also shows is there's a ton of there's a ton of enthusiasm behind this network, and people really love it, and they want to keep contributing to it. And that, in my mind, that's bullish. Engagement, good. More and more people getting more and more excited about this, that's good. That means that when we launch the next version of DAO, when we have these really exciting interchain smart contracts, we got all of the coolest shit on Juno because we got all the coolest devs working on it. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
To be fair, I think it only hurts.
I gotta jump here. Sorry, guys. I have a meeting at 5. Anyway, very much enjoyed this and looking forward to doing this again next week. I will see you guys on the next Game of Nodes.
See you, man.
See you Wednesday.
Later, everybody.
See ya.
Yeah, so just on what Jack was saying, to be fair, from what I said before, I think it only hurts Juno temporarily. It's like, like I said to the Fray, 2 months down the road, no one even remembers this. Maybe even a month. It's once it's put to bed, it's done. No one will remember.
No,
Why
I
did I
think
make
that's a
all the
little
t-shirts?
dismissive. I think that there's more potential for it helping the network than it does hindering it, right? Because if we are setting precedent, regardless of what precedent we're setting, then people are going to be looking into it. Like this is quite literally a case that if there's a course on crypto in a college and university, this is going to be in it because there's statements out here. There's lots of public statements of different positions that are being taken, and it kind of shows the power and the significance of decentralization, right? So I think that showing like the fact that it's going to be so broad scale potentially, I think that it's a really great voice for what Juno is and what Juno can develop further into.
So not to dismiss the prop, but I mean we've already done it. Prop 4, it got voted down. No one talked about it until Prop 16. I don't remember hearing any discourse about it after at all. And it was a big thing at the time. But at the time, people weren't as invested in it because not many people had paid for their tokens. It was all airdrop tokens. Now you've got people are much more vocal now, I think, because there's a lot more people who have invested in Juno, not just received Juno. But in terms of longevity of the conversation, I don't know. But Prop 4, once it got voted out, that was it. We never heard about it again that I remember.
I think that would be true if 16 had gone down. If 16 had said no and we decided we're leaving it, then I think that would be the end of the conversation. There would be a lot of contention now, what have you. But the fact that it went yes and that ultimately what is going to happen is an account with $125 million or $100 million now is potentially going to be sucked out of a wallet by choice. That's what makes it a more interesting and more compelling conversation. And I think that's what's going to cement it into textbooks as like the first really big proof of stake instance where governance.
Well, also just like a really interesting case of like Coder's Law, right? Because you can say Coder's Law on a proof of work blockchain, but you have no complicated governance structures. Whereas in proof of stake, ostensibly, you do have an electorate. Right, but I think I was saying this to Meow the other day. Like, you have like in most mature electoral systems, you have some kind of idea of separation of judiciary, electorate, and law. Right, so we kind of have law, we have code, and code implies very heavily, if not actively says, like that wallet balances are immutable, right? It makes that very heavy assumption, if not actually lays it down as law, because you can't alter them other than doing an upgrade and forcibly mutating chain state and then coming back up with a new upgrade. I would say that's as close to law as you can actually get with programming, you know, barring the halting problem and lots of other fun computer science holes in, you know, code actually having a fixed meaning, right? It all gets a bit postmodern. But then we have this other thing that we don't have, which is a judiciary to rule on what that means, right? So what's a judiciary? That's presumably devs, right? In this case, in the absence of an actual, because we don't have a constitution, we don't have a social contract, right? So we have devs who interpret the code, and they say, well, this is what it says, and this would be what changing it involves. And so I think there is like an element to this whole controversy, and I've seen a lot of it as a dev and as a validator who has said, number one, implementing this is radioactive. I'm not going to do it because legal implications, and frankly, I do believe that wallet balances should be immutable. Sorry, I think they should be changed only by transactions by the signer. You know, it takes a lot for a state or a bank to change a bank balance, and if we're not going to adhere to that same principle in crypto, what's the point of what we're doing? That's my honest opinion. That's just like my opinion, man, to quote the Big Lebowski, but it is my opinion. But you know, that push, because we don't have this like codified social contract or like a constitution or whatever, it ends up being the situation where the devs are effectively acting as a judiciary in terms of making a reasoning or a ruling, but we have no authority to do so because there's no social contract that says we should do so. But to the devs and the validators, it's kind of obvious when we're in a room together, we feel like we have a responsibility to the chain because we have a lot of skin in the game, right? And we care about the success of the chain over the long term and the principles that we see written into the code when we read it and go, okay, this is our interpretation of how it's going to work, and whether or not this thing should be changed. So all of that aside, I think there is a really interesting thing here, which may be, given that we don't have a codified constitution, this big impasse we've reached right now, which is essentially devs and validators kind of saying they're not going to run the code in one way, shape, or form. A large portion of people are not going to interact with it. Is actually governance working as well as it can given the circumstances? Because that tension between a judiciary and an electorate is literally the definition of a healthy democracy. It's just that we haven't codified it. So what's fascinating to me is that this has organically happened, right? We've literally seen a governance system mature to a separation of electorate and judiciary type system by accident in about a week, caused by this tension. And the other thing that's interesting is that separation and that dispute took the vote, which was, we all have different opinions on it, but it's now brought people back to a position where people on both sides have realized they have to compromise as a result of this. Both the devs and validators, who are generally on one side, but not exclusively, and members of the community who are generally on the other side, but not exclusively. But what it's actually meant is that separation has brought people more towards the center into realizing that a compromise may be necessary. And like all compromises, everybody will be unhappy, but like Null says, we'll have forgotten about it in 2 weeks. So the interesting thing for me about what comes out of this is whether or not we can actually arrive at a compromise that we can then take forward and codify, right? Because you could write a political science PhD on this, if so, Yeah. I mean, heck, if I didn't have so much bloody Rust code to write, I'd write it. I mean, I doubt I'd get accepted to write it from anywhere, but it would be interesting, wouldn't it? Sorry, I've been rambling. I'm going to shut up for a second now.
No, I think if the CCN team is watching this, please learn how to compromise. Like, try to understand what was been put out there. Try to be able to work a little bit and let's work towards the middle a little bit, because I agree that the back to the fence situation, either side of that is pretty brutal. And I think it's both sides are really damaging to the chain. So it's got to be something in the middle. Like, it has to be something where we work out where we uphold really the code of conduct and laws around the immutable blockchain. At the same time, we're trying to solve something that maybe should not have happened. And so I think there has to be some work within there to be able to do that. Could you guys imagine, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but could you imagine the fallout of a past Prop 17 where 40% of the validators skip that block and the chain halts? Like, could you imagine that situation where we have a stopped upgrade? Then what? Like, then there's nothing to move, nothing's happening.
Then Evmos.
Like, where does that go? How do you, communication of that? How to be able to build that back up? Is that forked at that point? Like, what a freaking disaster! Like, that would be.
I think the token price goes to zero, and we have to port all of our smart contract code to Kerberos, right?
You can't sell anything, right? Oh my goodness! Like,
No,
not
resolution.
Kerberos. It's bloody the other one.
That don't participate.
Oh no, it is Kerberos. No, it's not.
Yeah, Kerberos has smart contracts, doesn't it? Or did I imagine that?
It's the other
there's no
one.
one. There wasn't a Kerberos.
I felt like there was. If not, maybe now's the time for Doge and Wasm. I've been saying it for months. I've been saying it. Doge, I'm bullish on Doge and Wasm.
We could enrich, Ben. What are you doing? Enrich me.
I mean, Chihuahua forked Juno, and Juno partially forked Osmosis. So, I mean, it would be doing ourselves a service to make Doge and Wasm. That's what I'm saying.
Just fork Chihuahua and launch before they do their launch.
Why would you fork Chihuahua when we literally half the people on this call work on core Juno? We could just fork Juno.
Yeah, but it'd just be funnier because Chihuahua forked Juno.
Funny.
That would be funny.
It would be kind of low-key funny, but also hassle to fork Chihuahua and then incorporate the Juno improvements since their fork of Juno back into the Chihuahua fork to make Doge and Wasm a Wasm chain.
Plot twist, what if Chihuahua did it better?
I mean, we're all, Noel, as you well know, we're all just copy pastoring our own code and other people's code in this chat. Apart from Jabby, who probably writes very, very solid code. I have the feeling that Jabby's code is chef's kiss.
Don't say the quiet things out loud.
Yeah, back to the inside voice, I guess. So we did have other things that we were going to talk about today, but I think it's probably better just to leave this episode as a Prop 16 talk, and then crack on with some other exciting stuff next week. What do you guys think? We're up to an hour.
Yeah, we've got some cool stuff on our slate for next week, aren't we? And we can harass Jack about Horcrux next week as well. So should we do closing question?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, let's make this a regular thing. Let's end with some positivity. So, what are we most excited about in the next week? Schultzy, do you want to go first because you're like the most wholesome guy here?
Give me a pass, and I'll come back around to me.
Okay, well that was a bit of a damn squib. All right, come on now, help us out. Most excited for next week.
Sorry, did you say me?
Yeah.
Oh shit, man! I can we just I don't know. There's there's not much really. I haven't seen much going on in the next week, to be honest. I've been skulking around. We've got the craft testnet coming up, which I'm pretty excited about because especially if they've got some of their application running on that testnet. I don't know if many people here are gamers, but I know people are fully into Minecraft, and I'm pretty excited to see if it's workable with what they've come up with and what they've come up with. Been waiting a really long time as well for it, so excited to see that, I guess, is one thing that I'm looking forward to. And I believe that is imminent, so I can say that's what I'm looking forward to this week.
Cool, yeah. All right, Usurper, with your very slick branding.
You like it? At least it didn't shut off this week. So Craft actually, they just posted the Genesis while we were on this call. So things are happening. So it looks like they're going to try to launch tomorrow at some point, which is really good, or at least a test net. It's going to be launching tomorrow. Crescent Network came out with their test network. So that's going somewhere. I think last week my thing I was excited about was Evmos. So knowing that something was coming, and I did hear that this week something is coming. So it's only Wednesday, but I'm hoping we're going to hear a little bit more coming out of the validator structure there about what the plan is going forward. I know there was a Twitter space, I think yesterday or today. I missed it, unfortunately. So that's exciting to see. Like there's some movement there, and I think there's maybe some decisions within there. So that's all good stuff, man. That's great. Oh, and obviously, number one on that list is Juno testnet upgrades. Always the highlight of my weeks by far. So
at a very convenient time for Null as well, I gather.
Did you,
I mean, honestly,
did you do it at 3 a.m. again?
I think
Same time?
it's 4. It's 4. It's actually better.
4 a.m. I think it's 4 a.m. for you, man.
Well, it's only an hour earlier than what I usually get up anyway. So
You get up at 5 a.m.
yeah, I get up at 5 a.m. and catch up on
Drama.
Discord and Telegram before I get out of bed. Yeah.
I was telling Null
takes an hour
earlier
and
I'm
a
having
half
to
to catch
reduce
up in
my
the morning.
hours on other projects because there's not enough time to catch up with the drama at the moment.
Yep. So those are all good things. I think it's a good week.
Jabby, what are you excited about?
Nothing at all.
Big ass sandwiches
I'm just
and tinfoil hats.
barely skating by in life and hoping to not die. No.
Isn't
So
Pupmost
the
releasing something
establishment
soon,
of the carbon
Jabby?
market.
Isn't Pupmost releasing something soon? Maybe you have some idea of what Pupmost might be releasing that
I
might
have
be
no
exciting.
idea. I have no idea.
No idea. Absolutely certain.
The establishment of carbon market on osmosis, I think that's going to be really interesting to see sort of what's been elusive to the general public of, sort of carbon trading that happens between large judicial bodies and governments to sort of offset things and to make that more accessible. I think will really drive a lot of interesting use cases as we ultimately begin to agree that the planet's melting and, we don't like that. But what do I know? I'm just a guy. I should stick into my hole of crypto.
I mean, but I mean, it's also like you say, like as soon as we start looking at let's make the assumption that it works and it can go somewhere interesting. We're in a position where we have IBC contracts that can do all hell of stuff, right? From publishing to whatever, to media delivery to what anything your heart could desire, really. Combining that with the ability to interact with carbon credits on like a kind of buying or staking basis or whatever, imagine Medium, but every time you clap it's actually like the underlying token is in some way pegged to carbon credits that are actually being traded or given to some kind of NGO that could action them in a meaningful way. I mean, look, financialization of everything is unlikely to save the world, let's be honest, but it could. You never know. We should try everything at this point.
So you're saying that you want the clap to be easier to transmit?
Yeah.
Via blockchain.
Yeah, that's basically. I want it to be on the blockchain and have something that's going to make me feel good about helping the planet, but without doing anything to actually change my personal impact.
I love it.
Done.
And you have to get out your
So what's this about?
We all have a dream.
400
Eat it
times.
too.
On-chain clap coming Q1 to Q2 2022. You heard it here.
It's
actually no
something.
joke. No joke. Might be working on something, but yeah, we'll see about that. Schultzy, have you come up with yours?
Yeah, since this entire conversation was about Prop 16, I think I'm actually really excited for the way governance has been developing over the last few months in general. This isn't over the next week, but like if you look at Osmosis, their governance, it was almost always maximum yes every single time, very reliable. Same for Secret Network, and you're starting to see more activity in learning about what's actually happening in the proposal, more discussions happening on it. I think one downside of it is that there are people that do get really engaged and they get really excited about it, and they end up retaliating against their validators. We voted no, so let's like raise it to Reddit and tell everyone to delegate away. And I think that it's a really important point to make is that the fact that they're actually voting and engaging should be lauded. You know, even on osmosis, when everything was passing with 30%, 40%, whatever, that means 60 or 70% weren't voting. And really the people that aren't engaging with the network, those are the ones that should be shamed, not the ones that vote a certain direction. If they vote a certain direction, then just reach out to them and say, hey, why did you vote this way? And try and engage a conversation. I know all of you have engaged in the conversation, and I know many other validators, they've seen these conversations happening and then they get engaged. And the reality is we're all people. We have our own viewpoints. If you share your viewpoint, then we get to learn it, and then we get to kind of ingest it, and that might change our vote. It's really important to note that if a prop comes live on like the 1st and it ends on the 8th, and they vote yes on the 1st, that vote doesn't actually matter until the 8th actually hits. So they can change it, and that's okay. So if you see something that's awry, start a conversation. Calling people out on Reddit, maybe that's not the best way of going about it. But the fact that there's so much engagement, I think is really exciting.
Okay, I'm not going to, that's a really good answer. And I'm not going to get into this. Maybe we should get into it on a future episode. But secret ballots, huh? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a thought.
On that
that's
note,
I've been thinking a lot about recently.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Own Schultz, yes, that's really, I think I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I'm really excited for where this is going to take governance next. I think and hope that we'll come to a good compromise on Juno that means that we can all stay happily working on it for many years to come and stuff. And it's going to be one of those things we kind of look at in the rearview mirror. But regardless of how it kind of pans out, there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff that now happens from governance. And certainly a lot of the projects that I'm working on and working with people are either at kind of smart contract level or at chain level about how we move governance forward. And a lot of the ideas we were kind of going like, oh, but what if X happened has just played out in the last 2 weeks. And we just have like a concrete use case where we're now like proven, there we are, done. We're not wasting our time. So that's really exciting. But exciting the next week is that I'm going to be hopefully getting Horcrux set up in prod on our Kerberos validator, and that's what I'm excited about because I've been wanting to nerd out over that shit for absolutely weeks, and Prop 16 completely derailed my like, cool, I'm going to get to do some ops stuff and it's going to be sick. So that's what I'm excited about next week, which is a really dorky, unexciting thing. Like everybody's kind of got the high-minded stuff, and I'm like, I get to play around with some new tech.
Yeah, I'm actually excited to see you run Horcrux in prod.
Well, rather me than you, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I think everyone, a couple of weeks back when Usurper said that he was joining Juno using Horcrux, I think we were all like, report back, we all need to know how it went.
We want to know if it was a really bad idea.
Right,
Honestly,
exactly.
been looking at Horcrux for like 6 months. Like, Jack put out some versions of it a long time ago. Never been game enough to pull the trigger. But I'm pretty sure that Strangelove run virtually all of their main nets on Horcrux. So it can't be that unstable. Anyway, do we want to wrap it up?
Let's do it. Okay, so everybody, thanks for joining us. This has been Game of Nodes. Don't forget to like and subscribe. New episodes every week at 2300 hours UTC, and episodes will go up on podcast players afterwards, thanks to the man with the plan, Usurper, and I just pointed in the wrong direction because I'm mirrored. Hey. And I'm not actually sure that the tiling is the same for everybody. Regardless, thanks. Yeah, so you can access this wherever you like. And obviously, we're going to be doing the live streams here on YouTube. We're also going to be having new guests on every week, and we're going to start announcing those coming out. So moving forward, so follow us on Twitter at Game of Nodes _ at the end because we're sly like that. And we'll be announcing guests and stuff as we know them. And shout us out with any other topics that you think we should cover. And we probably will, except just not in this episode because we end up talking about Prop 16 for the entire thing. So, yeah, thanks very much for listening, guys. Say bye, everybody.